laptop because we're live. Hi. Yeah, my baby smashed my computer, so I'm like, sorry.
Oh no.
Typing in the password into everything. But anyway, hi Mark, welcome to Venture with Grace. We're live.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk today.
Awesome. Okay, so to start our show, I want to give a quick shout out to our amazing sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Verimind. If you are a GP or LP looking to simplify the capital raising and deployment process, Verimind is here to help. Trusted by over 800 funds and managing more than $2 billion in transaction, Verimind offers a secure, streamlined payment platform designed specifically for private capital markets. Say goodbye to manual reconciliation and repeated follow-ups. Raise and deploy capital faster and with greater transparency. Ready to make your fund operation smoother? Visit Verimind.com and see how easy it can be. Also, we'll have a bit.ly link here and then click on that link, please. Okay, so to begin the show,
Nice
sorry,
read. Good job.
Thanks. Yeah, use Verimind. Anyway, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to know you a little bit more. So throughout our coffee session, I feel like you have such an interesting background. So you have worked at BuzzFeed, you have worked at Clear, and you have worked at Extended Fertility, and now you're in venture capital. You worked at FirstMark before, now you're at Comcast Ventures. So why don't we start with like what were some core lessons that you've learned in your various like very unique career journey that you kind of like took on as like a lesson that you kind of implement every day today?
Yeah. So we only have an hour. Probably could spend it all on this, but no, yeah. As you mentioned, it's been a bit of a winding career journey so far, and kind of not to bury the lead. I think the biggest thing I've learned is that kind of careers are very much not linear, and but there's a lot you can kind of take from every step along the way that just makes you better at whatever comes next. So quick background on myself. So I'm Marc Silberman. I'm a partner at Comcast Ventures. I've been at Comcast for about 3 years and have spent most of my career kind of bouncing around from different roles across the tech ecosystem in New York. So I started off in investment banking out of college, and for a bunch of different reasons, I realized pretty quickly banking was not the right career for me. Needless to say, I was not the highest rated analyst in my class. I was focused on restructuring, so working with bankrupt companies or near bankrupt companies. So pretty kind of the opposite of high growth startup investing at that point. But so I spent about a little over a year in investment banking, and then kind of jumped into startup land and haven't really looked back. So my first kind of startup role was at BuzzFeed. This was back in 2013. So when BuzzFeed was kind of dominating the cultural conversation across the internet. So I spent kind of my first year and a half there focused on finance work. So working with our CFO and director of finance on kind of FP&A work, fundraising, board management, a bunch of other kind of ad hoc strategic projects. I then spent kind of the last kind of year and a half there working on international growth strategy and operations, which was very, very cool. So working with teams in Brazil and the UK, and worked on our joint venture with Yahoo Japan to launch BuzzFeed Japan. So feel like I aged. I was a kind of a grizzled veteran after 3 years at BuzzFeed. So spent 3 years there, then went to my first venture role at Time Warner. So also my first corporate venture role. So focused on digital media investments. Then kind of shifted back into the startup ecosystem, as you mentioned, at Extend Fertility and then Clear. And then right before joining Comcast, I was at FirstMark. So kind of a very, very kind of known and successful seed and Series A fund in New York, where I was running their corporate development function, which was largely focused on helping the B2B portfolio companies within within FirstMark kind of close deals with companies like Comcast or Pepsi or Capital One, whoever it may be. And then about 3.5 years ago, almost, I joined Comcast. Allison Goldberg, who ran the ventures group at Time Warner a bunch of years ago. She took over Comcast Ventures about 4 years ago and was kind enough to hire me again for a second time. It was crazy enough to do that. So that's a little bit of the journey. But yeah, as I mentioned, lots of kind of learnings. The biggest one is careers aren't linear, but oftentimes those can make for the most interesting stories. And I've definitely become better at investing by having spent time in a few different startups across different industries.
Totally. I feel like you have, so I think in your venture career, you have worked at some of the very cool like venture firms. Like, I wouldn't say they're like venture firm, but more of like a corporate venture arm. So like, I think Time Warner is a really interesting one, because of it works with, Warner Bros. Or like HBO or like Turner. So maybe we could start with like, in your venture journey, maybe we start with the Comcast Ventures first because like that's where you are now. Why don't we talk about like since like what is it kind of like look like for you day to day from hearing from the I want to say internally, but I guess like the general direction of where the company is going, and then how do you kind of like balance that with like financial investment for these different startups. And maybe we could talk about like the differences between like corporate ventures to since you were also at FirstMark Capital, like why don't we talk about like the differences that you have been like experiencing from like a traditional VC firm to corporate venture?
Yeah. Yes, let me, I'll kind of give a quick overview of Comcast Ventures and what we do, and then I think that'll probably lead pretty nicely into kind of some of the big differences. So we are a corporate strategic venture capital group that invests on behalf of Comcast in a variety of different areas that we think could kind of be important to Comcast growth over the long term. So thinking kind of 2, 5, 10 years in the future, what are going to be the kind of industries and areas where Comcast could kind of play a meaningful role, and how do we invest in those industries to learn about kind of what's next and what's on the horizon. So from a focus area perspective, it's pretty broad. So we invest in AI, of course, and cybersecurity. Those are kind of two areas that I spend a good chunk of time in. But we also invest in healthcare, prop tech, energy and sustainability, and we have a bucket that we call enabling technologies, which kind of fits a bunch of other things that don't fit nicely into those other areas. But we're typically coming in at the Series A or Series B stage, but flexible, kind of based on the uniqueness of every deal. And usually our initial check size is somewhere in the $3 to $7 million range, but again, kind of flexible in our approach. But I think the kind of going back to the earlier part of your question, we kind of invest with a dual mission. So any investment we make has to kind of stand alone from a dual meaning kind of financial and strategic. So any investment we make kind of has to stand alone on its merits from a financial perspective. So can this company become a large kind of venture scale business in the future? But then the other part is kind of the part that's very, very unique to corporate venture. So thinking about what can we kind of strategically gain from an investment, and that kind of strategic bucket is so kind of broad and amorphous and can mean so many different things. So thinking about can we learn about kind of a disruptive new technology? Can we learn about kind of a new market that Comcast may be able to answer? Can we identify kind of a partner for a product that we're building? There's a whole bunch of things that can kind of check off that strategic box. But so from a kind of day-to-day perspective, I spend a lot of time kind of in that strategic bucket. So working with executives across the company, which I'm sure we'll talk more about later. We have an advisory board at Comcast Ventures, which is about, I think, 16 kind of cross-functional executives today that we kind of gently tap on the shoulder for help with things like diligence and kind of being kind of warm first calls for our portfolio companies within the Comcast ecosystem. So I don't know, I think that's the part I really like about corporate venture is I get to spend a lot of time with kind of leaders at a massive company like Comcast which again, I think just makes me a little bit better equipped to have some conversations with startups as well.
For sure. I wonder, since like as you mentioned, I think like beyond the traditional capital, there is some strategic elements to it. And there is like an advisory board within the Comcast network that like people might be like helping with like diligence or kind of guiding through certain specific areas of things. I wonder maybe if you could share like the general trends that you're seeing in the space, since like you guys have invested in various different AI companies like AI 21, Resemble AI, or like Hume. Like, why don't we start with what are you looking for when you're investing in AI startups? And then what are some major themes that you feel like Comcast has been, or like, I guess like for Comcast Ventures has been paying attention to?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so from kind of taking the first part of the question, thinking about kind of what do we look for with startups, I think it's not to kind of sound too repetitive, and it's probably nothing groundbreaking compared to other venture investors. Like, you want like really incredible founding teams that are building kind of transformative technologies that kind of are impacting very large industries. So all of that is kind of somewhat obvious, but I think the more interesting part is we look for companies that we think can like really, I don't know if integrate is the right word, but startups that we think we can be kind of uniquely helpful to from an investor perspective. So, and that kind of the ways we can kind of be uniquely helpful partners is super different based on the stage of a company. So if we're investing in kind of a early Series A company that is just kind of starting their commercial kind of journey, can Comcast be a design partner for them? So can we help kind of define like the big use cases for their product, and like ultimately be an early logo that they can use to then close a bunch of other kind of big Fortune 50 customers? If if a startup we're investing in is a little bit later stage, can we be a distribution partner for them? Can we, on like the most obvious side, can Comcast be a kind of core customer for that startup's product? So there's a bunch of kind of things we look for from kind of that strategic angle, in addition to all of the kind of table stakes things that a traditional venture investor looks for. In terms of so specific kind of areas, not to get kind of too far ahead, but and again, these are probably some of these are a little bit less sexy, but in Comcast land, they're pretty important. So I'll take security, for example. So we one area where we as a group have been spending time is cybersecurity solutions for small businesses. And again, this is an area that so much of the capital and focus is on kind of companies like Wiz that are selling to massive companies. And there's a little bit less focus on companies that are building, or startups that are building solutions for like small businesses, which make up the vast majority of businesses in the United States. So, and also thinking from like a Comcast perspective, we have a pretty large B2B business called Comcast Business that sells kind of a whole host of solutions to enterprises directly, and kind of anything we can do to strengthen our kind of product portfolio and positioning, and just learning about what are the types of solutions that a small business may be looking for is interesting to us. So that's probably one area where we spend time that maybe a little bit kind of others don't spend as much time, and that's probably unique to kind of Comcast specifically.
For sure. I wonder, since like you mentioned about security and small business security, what is the primary differences between the security that's needed by a small company versus like, the traditional, like, Fortune 500 or like a mid-market bigger company?
Yeah, I think a bunch of them, but the one that kind of has stood out to me, and like in terms like based on kind of the conversations we've had, is that if you're kind of a company much smaller than Comcast, but still fairly large, so maybe, I don't know, 1,000 employees, a few hundred employees, like you probably have 1, 2, 3 people kind of focused on IT specifically, and maybe even kind of specific security roles.
Mhm.
So you have kind of the talent in-house that can work directly with security vendors to
Mhm.
set up products and kind of make sure your entire employee base is kind of up and running with the latest tools to make sure kind of your infrastructure is safe and secure. If you're a 30, 20 person, 50-person company, you probably have none of that.
Mhm.
And most cybersecurity companies kind of treat small businesses like mini enterprises. So
Mhm.
it's very complex kind of setups and like requires a lot of time and integrations and kind of things that small business owners just don't really have the time or interest in doing. So all of that to say, kind of complexity or lack or kind of simplicity rather is
Mhm.
super, super important for SMB security tools, kind of compared to a solution that is selling to a much larger enterprise.
Mm. I wonder, can you walk us through like the sales journey? Because I actually thought this was really interesting because later on we'll have like Sid from Foundation Capital. He's
Yeah.
like focusing on security.
Yep.
And I was like listening to one of the other podcasts that it was like they were saying that like small company security is actually very overlooked because a lot of the small business owners, they think that um people would only target like the really big players or like people with a lot of money instead of like themselves, but a lot of the threats are happening just towards like smaller companies because um I guess like the people who are targeting are uh I guess like having a more broader net, and then like they like if you like accidentally hit like a really big pocket, that's great, but like a lot of people were just targeting a ton of smaller companies to try to take more money basically. It's essentially, I feel like this is such an interesting area to look at. But I guess like towards like, since you mentioned like some of these businesses have maybe like 1 to 3 security people, and it was like not really properly set up, like what are, maybe if we could talk about like what is the current security system that like most SMB are using, and I guess like what does the go-to market look like for some of the stuff that you have been seeing in the market?
Yeah. All good questions and very. I did see that you're having Sid come on later. He's awesome. So I'm excited to tune into that one as well. But the so I think from a kind of base level, if
Mhm.
like, small businesses are likely using kind of the kind of inherent solutions within like the Microsoft Office, like Microsoft ecosystem, if that's kind of what they're set up on. And for a lot of companies, that's okay.
Mhm.
But if you kind of want kind of additional security, or if you're operating in an industry that requires it, that's where it kind of gets a little bit more complicated. So, and kind of going back to your earlier point, I think it's like one of the reasons why there probably hasn't been as much kind of focus on small business security is that, like exactly what you said, it's such a kind of fragmented market. Like it's much, I don't know if easier is the right word, but uh, there's kind of it makes a lot of sense to go after a customer that can pay you $500,000, $1 million in annual contract value, versus kind of trying to kind of stitch together tens or hundreds or thousands of customers that can pay you maybe like $5,000 a year or whatever the right number
Mhm.
is. So, and like it just requires a whole different kind of go-to-market motion. So, whereas a lot of kind of the bigger security providers have enterprise sales teams and kind of much more of a classic setup where they're doing a lot of outbound sales and kind of out on the pavement, going to talk to customers.
Mhm.
For kind of small business security, given how fragmented it is, you really have to have a different approach. So a lot of small business providers kind of uh, small business security providers distribute their
Mhm.
products through managed service providers, um, and as a way to kind of reach many of these customers more efficiently. Because if you're, it's just the economics don't work if you're trying to kind of pick off one by one customers that will pay you $1,000 a year. That's where it just becomes very hard.
I wonder, so like maybe if we could tap into like some of the recent investment that you've made, can you use like one of your portfolio companies to walk us through like from meeting the founder to thinking about like, I guess like diligencing, leveraging, I guess the Comcast network and eventually come to a conclusion and decided to like invest and then also winning the deal to thinking about exiting?
Yep. I'll probably take you through two, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
Figure we have an hour, so why not? But so the first one will be a company called NLX, which is a conversational AI platform that is focused on kind of helping brands drive better customer experiences. So Comcast Ventures participated in NLX's $12 million Series A early last year. It's a pretty unique kind of background for us, and again, I think we're pretty uniquely Comcast. So we, as a group, first met Andre Papancha, the founder, co-founder, and CEO of NLX, in March of 2023. So like pretty early on in his journey. And so we had our first meeting. We kind of agreed to keep the conversation open, as we often do, as the company builds and progresses towards the Series A. So kind of in that in-between time, NLX actually joined a Comcast kind of driven accelerator program called Lyft Labs. So it's kind of a sister group to Comcast Ventures that focuses on helping companies kind of break down red tape and close enterprise deals within kind of the broader Comcast NBC Universal ecosystem. So NLX joined the kind of an early Lyft Labs cohort, and it's a 6-week program that just is like basically a boot camp in how to sell to Comcast. So NLX went through this program, wound up kind of catching the eye of many kind of leaders within Comcast and our customer experience kind of ecosystem. There were like different POCs that were built that like really just drummed up a lot of interest internally. So it NLX kind of fast forward, NLX kind of quote graduated from the Lyft Labs program. We had kind of had the best possible diligence, given that many of our technologists had already spent a lot of time with the NLX team, had built kind of prototypes using NLX's technology. So when the time came to that the company was raising their Series A, we were really kind of a natural partner for them. So we wound up participating in their Series A round, which was led by Circano, which is based out in Seattle. And kind of taking another part of your question, kind of since that investment, Comcast has become a NLX customer. So we leverage NLX for some kind of employee-focused kind of HR conversation. So if I need to ask a question about where do I find my W-2 or whatever it may be, NLX can drive a lot of that conversation. But I think what kind of putting my investor hat on, what one thing like other than the kind of the really outstanding team that was exciting to us was that NLX was already driving big value to a massive company. So they're one of their kind of core customers is United Airlines. So they, if you go kind of if you're on United's website or their app and you want to chat about adding a kind of I have a 2-year-old, so adding a lap child to your ticket or whatever it may be, NLX can kind of power a lot of those kind of conversations automatically. So kind of keeping kind of human kind of customer service agent time open to do kind of more complex activities. So as part of our diligence process, we spoke with United Airlines. We also spent a lot of time with our internal teams that had already built products using NLX. So it's just a very selfishly kind of easy decision to invest because we'd already spent so much time with the team.
For sure. I wonder, since like the company has started in like 2018, and I feel like, as you mentioned, like they went through the Comcast sister team to like, or the lab that like help them to sell to Comcast. I wonder for a company like this, like a startup to sell to Comcast, like how much traction do they have to have? And like, how do you verify if this is like very, skill worthy? Because I think a lot of the AI startups problem is like, they may able to handle small scale of the product, but when it comes to like selling to big enterprise, how does that kind of look like? Also, like, what is the program kind of entail? Like in the 6 week, how do you kind of
Yeah.
like sell yourself?
Yeah, you really should have my colleague Laura on at some point. So I'm going to make that connection after this. So Laura runs the Lyft Labs program, but kind of quickly, kind of taking the first part about enterprises working with big companies. I think it's, and this is probably something I know has been shared in some of your prior episodes. Like it's very hard, and oftentimes it can be like a time suck for early stage startups, because kind of big companies have like a lot of kind of legal kind of considerations before they work with a company. They have kind of massive security request lists. There's just lots of kind of like, and that's why sales cycles take so long. But kind of the flip side is like once you're in, kind of the juice is often worth the squeeze in terms of kind of contract size and kind of visibility and ability to kind of parlay that one big relationship into another, et cetera. So I think it's kind of easier for us to kind of bring a company into the Comcast ecosystem from a Comcast Ventures perspective and kind of say, go to our applied AI team, for example, and say, you should really take a look at using this tool. It's easier for us to do that when we can point to at least kind of one larger company that is kind of at least kind of leveraging or kind of even doing some sort of POC with a certain solution. So it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of a Comcast peer Fortune 50 company, but just kind of a kind of real enterprise logo that kind of gives us and gives kind of our team's confidence that kind of we can accomplish the goals we want to accomplish. And oftentimes that's probably why more corporate investors don't do kind of super early seed, pre-seed investing, just because it like oftentimes companies aren't like startups at that stage aren't quite ready to kind of go through all of the kind of big process requirements to work with a kind of a massive scale enterprise. So so kind of having enterprise customers is obviously something kind of comforting. But if you don't have that, I think having a team that has done it before and working with large enterprises is a nice kind of, I guess, backup as well. But so shifting to kind of Lyft Labs for a second. So Lyft Labs exists to kind of help, I guess in their current iteration, they exist to help companies kind of just like break through all of the red tape that can cause sales cycles with big corporations to be a little bit slower. So as part of the 6-week program, the companies within Lyft Labs, they kind of work directly with kind of enterprise buyers and kind of builders within Comcast to build POCs so we can get comfortable with their technology. They spend time with our legal team to kind of understand what are the things that big companies, especially like Comcast, ask for when signing big enterprise agreements. There's kind of an end of session demo day effectively where the companies can showcase alongside their kind of Comcast enterprise mentor what they've built. So all these things are kind of designed to kind of bring comfort on both sides to kind of drive a commercial relationship forward. And that team has been pretty successful at doing that so far.
For sure. I wonder, since like you mentioned about like, I guess like this company, it is in the customer service arena, and there is quite a few different AI powered customer services in the, I guess like in the ROM. So like there's like some of the bigger ones or like already becoming very big. It's like, Krista AI, which is like the founder was on our show, or Forethought, same as the founder was on our show. Even on the show, like last week we had like Maven AGI. So I feel like there's a lot of different companies that are having the different approach to tackle the customer service arena, what do you feel like this company is like specialized in that make you feel comfortable that this will be like one of the best solution for Comcast? And obviously they have been able to land some of the really big logos like Saks Fifth Avenue, United, or like Red Bull. Like, how do you think about their unique approach when it comes to landing these like corporate, like Fortune 500 clients?
Yeah. So Comcast Ventures is also proud investors in Cresta as well. So glad you had to hang on. And I think customer service is just such a large category. And there are so many different aspects to it. So there's kind of automating text-based conversations. There's kind of like Cresta's origins are more in the kind of customer agent like training kind of ecosystem. So how do you help make sure that your customer-facing agents are kind of best prepared to tackle certain questions and kind of can learn from every interaction on how to be better for the next one. So it's such a massive market that I'm sure will be many winners in it, and kind of it can be segmented into so many kind of smaller areas that are also massive markets in their own right. So that's kind of one kind of aspect of the market, like why it's so there are so many kind of startups going after it, is because it is such a large market, obviously. And then Comcast is also pretty unique kind of in that ecosystem as well. Like we have like over 30 million home internet customers. We have more business-focused customers. We have a very, very large customer service operation. So thinking about like really how can we make sure that we're at the cutting edge from a technological perspective there is important to us. So so for NLX specifically, yeah, I mean, I think from you really nailed it in terms of like the confidence that we were able to get by some of the logos that they had already. And really able to spend time with their team kind of throughout all the work that NLX had done, kind of building POCs with Comcast prior to our investment, was pretty helpful to us as we were making our investment decision. But I do think it's like given kind of how many new players are continuing to pop up in the space, leveraging kind of different technologies, different kind of agentic focused technologies that can kind of take actions on behalf of an enterprise without having any human in the loop. There's just so much change that the companies just have to be so fast in adapting.
I wonder, since like they had a bunch of different logos, but I feel like the different logos, they are solving different problems, from United Airlines to Comcast to like Red Bull. Like I feel like everybody's selling different products. Is a customer service solution kind of similar towards each company, or like how, and then also like how much enterprise value they have to create to get to a threshold that you feel like it's actually worthwhile? Because I feel like as a small business, like I feel like selling to enterprise is not as hard, because if you're just selling to one department, and then if the purchase, like I guess like purchase value is like not super substantial, it's like not as hard to like logo shop. But the problem is like I feel like for customer service, or like something that's like a really universal problem that will especially for I guess like a Comcast or a United Airlines, these are the things that are like I feel like will be very huge. Like their spending will be very huge. Like how much do you feel like the AI company can charge in that space, and like how much does this company have already penetrated into these like different companies that make you feel like it's actually worth to take a look at?
Yeah, good question. So with NLX specifically, like I think there is such a kind of like the idea of customer experience is so broad. Like thinking like customers can be kind of end paying customers of a product. It can be it can kind of, the definition can be morphed into like a internal use case for employees. So like as I mentioned, NLX is kind of deployed within Comcast for employee focused use cases. So when you have kind of external focused use cases, you have internal focused use cases. and lots of stuff in between, you can really kind of do the land and expand motion with big companies. So I think that's particularly appealing. And for those use cases, I'll probably table the pricing model stuff for kind of a little later. But another kind of exciting use case for NLX, just to give kind of what I think could be, knock on wood, hopefully another kind of expand motion. So they're working with Toyota today to, Andre just spoke at TechCrunch Disrupt about this, but they are driving a technician-focused experience. So if something, if a technician kind of is trying to figure out what may be wrong with a Toyota vehicle, they can have kind of a natural language interface to kind of index kind of the many, many millions of pages of manuals and testing materials that Toyota has kind of in their library. So that's taking kind of the customer experience to the technician level, but obviously Toyota is a massive company that has different kind of tentacles, from a individual car owner perspective, lots of like dealerships. There's lots of opportunity to kind of expand on that definition of customer experiences for NLX. So that's particularly exciting. I think from a pricing perspective, there's just a general I'll kind of speak generally, thinking about how do you kind of free up your kind of customer representatives to kind of focus on the most complex tasks. And you do that by kind of removing a bunch of the kind of things from their plate that AI could probably be pretty good at replacing. So as I mentioned, kind of NLX is their first use case within United Airlines, was helping kind of individuals add a wheelchair to their reservation. So something that may have been kind of escalated to a human agent was kind of quickly kind of passed along to NLX to handle that request. So kind of the more deflections you can do is just like a pretty early indication of ROI, that kind of freeing up your customer kind of agents for kind of higher level tasks.
I wonder, so like since we also briefly talked about there's like the Krista AI, there is NLX, like what are the different customer dynamic are they targeting, or like, you know, are they like, how do you kind of like differentiate these like different companies' strategic approach to enterprise, since I feel like Krista also
like
have
in terms of their sales process, or kind of like their product?
I think both. Because I feel like in the end, I feel like I hear about a lot of like different founders came on and like people were talking about like land and expand, like you mentioned earlier. So like maybe they start selling to one part of the customer. Like for example, I guess like NLX is focusing on like internal first, and then like when it comes to like selling to enterprise, I think everybody's goal eventually is to take ideally the whole segment of customer service. And how do you think about like the differentiations between like these two companies, or like maybe it doesn't have to be these two companies, but like the, I guess like NLX different approach from like these like other customer service brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of just like industry, like they're just like talking at a very high level about kind of what we're seeing. So obviously there's a lot of momentum behind kind of the fully like agent-driven approach to kind of solving customer kind of queries, or not needing any human in the loop for kind of any aspect. And that's kind of a kind of one kind of approach that companies are taking, is like startups are saying you won't need to have kind of any representative spend time in any of this stuff. Our systems will integrate, will like make the input in your Salesforce, for example. We'll kind of handle creating a return label, whatever it may be. And then like there's kind of another end of the spectrum that's kind of building maybe more like, or part of their solution is a little bit more kind of co-pilot focused. So thinking about how do we kind of give customer service agents superpowers to be more efficient, provide better service. Like there will always be very complex tasks that require kind of a human to kind of complete most efficiently. So how do we make kind of those experiences even better? So that's kind of another end of the spectrum. Then there's kind of a hybrid end of the spectrum. So there's just so many, as you mentioned, kind of different approaches to the market. And I think even within these kind of different approaches, there are multiple players building tools. So it's definitely a lot to keep our, from an investor perspective, a lot to kind of wrap your head around and kind of making sure you have a continued pulse of what's happening. And then there's also kind of the kind of like the foundation model aspect to all of this. So how do you make sure as a kind of big corporation that the tools you're using are leveraging kind of the latest and greatest from a kind of foundation model perspective? Can you pick and choose which models are used? Or would you rather just rely on kind of a single provider for your use cases? So there's so many different, and also modalities is another kind of aspect. Do you want a solution to cover just kind of text or add voice, or are there other kind of aspects as well? So there's just a lot of kind of considerations that are kind of out there.
For sure. I want to maybe switch gear a little bit. So like you have some other really exciting investments. So some of them are like, I think they're like in very diverse sector that I wouldn't like imagine Comcast invest in. So like, or like, I wouldn't say like not imagining them investing in, but like, I just think it's like really unique. So for example, like, Hume AI. So I feel like it's a voice script generating, I don't know, like a text to speech thing. So like I feel like it's a very unique company. Also, like for example, I feel like Haven Energy, that's like a solar battery company. So like how do you, maybe if we could like tap into, like you mentioned like you have a second company that you have in mind that you can walk us through on your investment, and maybe we could start from there, and then we could talk about like how do you like get exposed to these like different category of things, and then how do you think about like Comcast could like work with them in the long run in these like very differentiated sectors.
Yeah, I don't know. That's also that's another pretty fun part of the job is that Comcast overall business is so broad that it gives us kind of really interesting flexibility to be diverse in kind of our sector focuses. Sometimes it's a little bit too broad, so we try to rein it in at least a little bit. But I'll take kind of Haven Energy. Thank you for teeing that one up. So as context, Haven is a technology platform that facilitates the kind of design and implementation of residential energy storage or home battery systems, as well as solar systems as well. Comcast Ventures participated in Haven's $7 million Series A early last year, which was led by Giant Ventures. And I think kind of it's definitely probably a little bit less obvious about why kind of a home energy startup is kind of a target of a company like Comcast compared to kind of a customer service solution, which is kind of just, it's much kind of easier to close that logical gap. So from our kind of thesis perspective, like it was really kind of two things. So like one is kind of the kind of more typical market thesis, and the second is kind of much more Comcast specific. So from a market perspective, I mean, a bunch of different things attracted us to Haven. So one is that energy reliability is becoming more and more of a problem. So just looking kind of some stats right now from kind of our kind of initial investment memo, but weather-related power outages have increased 78% since the early 2000s. 83% of major outages in the US over the last 20 years were attributed to weather-related events. So as kind of weather-related events are becoming, unfortunately, more frequent, ensuring kind of ways for consumers and households to have reliable energy sources is even more important. At the same time, electricity rates have also risen extremely quickly over the last several years. And so when you have kind of that combination, it just kind of creates an interesting opportunity for technology to play a role in driving a solution. So that's kind of the market dynamics. And then I guess there's another kind of quick context point. So the idea with the home battery is that you can store energy in this battery at times when power is cheapest. So kind of off hours, let's say. So I don't know, a weekday before 3 o'clock or in the middle of the night. and then you can deploy energy from that battery at the time of day when energy is most expensive. So between 3 and 9 p.m., let's say. So, and then there's kind of a longer term goal for Haven of if they deploy batteries into a bunch of different homes, you can then connect these batteries to the internet and kind of create what's called a virtual power plant, which I won't spend kind of too much time into, but it's a way to help homeowners kind of monetize their home batteries and kind of give energy back to the grid over time. So there's a kind of the market aspect, and then there's the Comcast specific aspect, which is to me a little bit more kind of interesting and unique. So Comcast, as I mentioned before, we have somewhere in the 32 million range of home connectivity customers. And there's kind of a lot of, and kind of we think of home connectivity, or at least from a Comcast Ventures perspective, and me personally, think of home connectivity pretty broadly and thinking of like what other kind of problems can like better home connectivity help solve. And one of those, at least I think, is kind of residential energy. So thinking about how do we kind of leverage these customer relationships to drive kind of solutions in the energy space. So Haven's focus on kind of connected residential energy stood out as an area where we could potentially over the long term add value kind of in driving customer relationships and kind of using our connectivity to connect Haven batteries to the grid. So lots of kind of strategic use cases that were kind of interesting to us over the long term. So, and this is like long term meaning, I don't know, 2, 5, 10 years down the road. But in terms of kind of how we met Haven, so there aren't a ton of companies kind of building kind of solutions kind of in that specific set parameters that we think we could be uniquely kind of helpful to. So we had been tracking Haven for a while. They raised a seed round. So we kind of connected with them after that seed round, had kind of started building a relationship, which was always selfishly very nice to be able to have given out at least our reverse pitch to a startup in advance of when they're actually raising money, so we can be top of mind when they are. So Haven kind of began their Series A process. We reconnected then. We had leveraged kind of diligence help from a few kind of folks within Comcast that have been spending time thinking about kind of residential energy as well. So that's kind of an example of us tapping into our kind of internal resources here. So kind of fast forward, the company is growing quickly. They're operating primarily in California today. And like we're still kind of in the early to mid stages of identifying the exact areas where kind of Haven and Comcast can really kind of drive growth together. But I think specifically as kind of this residential kind of energy focus is still very much a focus within Comcast, kind of being kind of close to the Haven team and leveraging kind of their expertise will be valuable to us.
For sure. I wonder, since I guess like one of the things about hardware is I feel like there's like a lot of upfront costs, and then the profit margin or like the unit economics is like very interesting to evaluate. I guess like how do you guys think about like I guess like the profit margin at the beginning, or like what are some I guess diligence, or like what are some kind of like evaluation that goes into to like think about if the business model makes sense. And then also I feel like just building hardware takes a lot of effort, and then there's a lot of people building I guess like in the battery or like solar space in general these days. How do you think about again like I guess like the differentiations or like the core thing that you want to see in a startup versus like, you know, a lot of people are building in the same category? Like how do you kind of like I guess make sure that like you pick the right one?
Yeah, that's always the hardest part. But so Haven actually they're not building the batteries themselves, so they're installing kind of off the shelf kind of commercially available home batteries, but their kind of secret sauce is the platform to help kind of design the systems and make it really easy for kind of consumers to purchase a home battery and then installers to actually put them in and kind of bridge that gap. because it's still like a relatively kind of opaque market. So there's a little bit less kind of hardware development kind of risk, but yeah, like hardware investing is like kind of a very difficult. Like there are many kind of venture investors, at least from my experience, that won't really touch it. And kind of the investors that do kind of have like immense expertise in it, which makes them kind of uniquely suited to be able to take kind of the risk associated with investing in kind of like a very, very hardware heavy company. So, but with Haven, there still is kind of kind of less of a hardware development risk, but they do have to buy home batteries and then install them, and then they collect revenue later. So there is kind of like a cash flow kind of bridge that the company just needs to have like a very strong kind of financial leadership to help make sure that working capital is kind of adequately accounted for. So that's all kind of aspects of the business that we spent a lot of time making sure that the company was kind of set up to handle. But in terms of kind of the thinking about how a company like Haven, like why we think they can kind of are uniquely kind of suited to do really well in this market, I think it was a very, very unique team for Haven. So their kind of founding team or repeat founders that have like a pretty, what we thought was a compelling mix of energy industry expertise and also kind of really deep experience building consumer-facing businesses. So Haven's kind of two of their co-founders were Jeff Chapin and Phil Krim. They were the co-founders of Casper, the sleep company. So they know what it takes to build a kind of consumer brand to scale up from kind of the very, very early days to a company doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And for like a company like Haven that does have like a consumer focus to it, that was a pretty kind of unique aspect. And then Haven's CEO, Vinny Campo, brought a lot of kind of the energy chops. So he was at a company called Bulb Energy before Haven. He also spent a bunch of time at Uber. So we thought kind of having that kind of unique blend of a kind of consumer focus to build Haven into kind of a leading consumer brand in the energy space, but also kind of energy kind of expertise was pretty interesting. Kind of over time, as Haven has found a lot of success selling to customers in California, they brought on an executive team that has scaled companies like Sunrun to big numbers. So it's been fun to see. But yeah, it's a certainly like the one of the interesting, fun, crazy parts of the job is shifting kind of a mindset from an AI customer service investment to a company building or installing home batteries to a company focused on data center optimization. So there's a lot of context switching, which I don't know, a lot of fun, but can also be a little bit jarring.
For sure. I wonder, since like, I mean, another company that like I thought were really interesting was like Hume AI. So like I feel like this looks like a back-end product of a customer service company, or like, you know, I feel like it can be used in a lot of different scenarios, but however, I feel like the company itself, like I wonder, like, maybe if you could share a little bit more about like the product vision on like what, like where they're selling to. Obviously, this looks very interesting about like, you know, designing the personalization of different, I guess, like voice or like, I guess, like different personality or characters. How do you kind of think of like when you're investing in a company like this, like what would be the and use case to a degree?
Yeah. No, Hume is a fascinating company. So it's actually, I'll caveat all of this by saying it wasn't a deal that I specifically led at Comcast Ventures. So I'll probably speak a little bit at a higher level about it. But I think kind of like we invested a couple of years ago in Hume, and it was kind of pre some of their kind of voice products that they have in the market today. But one of the most kind of interesting things about kind of them at the time of the investment is they had built kind of an emotion model. So they're one of their founders, Alan, is kind of an emotion scientist by background. So they had trained a model to be able to look at, and I could be like totally butchering all of this, so don't hold me to it. But they had trained a model to be able to look at someone's face or listen to how they're speaking and have a pretty good idea about how that person may be feeling in that moment. So are they frustrated? Are they happy? Are they angry, sad, whatever it may be? So that kind of was a pretty unique approach and data set that they were gathering. So they've taken a lot of that data and built it into a voice model that can be like really kind of showcase emotion. So if you want a kind of an AI-driven voice to be kind of more excited or sound more nervous, whatever it may be, they can do that. But the kind of use cases to kind of the core emotion model were really, really broad, especially like I'm just thinking back to when we invested a few years ago. So thinking about in the healthcare kind of ecosystem, is there a way to analyze someone's voice and be able to understand if there's kind of anxious tendencies coming from it? How do they really feel in a given moment versus what they may be saying? So there's kind of a healthcare aspect that was interesting to us. There's, of course, a customer service aspect. So I don't know, sometimes it's pretty easy to tell if a customer's pissed off, but maybe there are kind of ways that Hume can kind of take it a level deeper to get like a little bit more emotional understanding from a conversation. There's also kind of the idea of feeding in knowledge about emotion into a large language model. So if you're kind of speaking to an LLM, for that LLM to really understand, kind of in real time adapt to a user's feelings was pretty powerful. So it was a pretty kind of horizontal platform from that respect, at least at the time we invested.
I just thought it was like so interesting because I remember like maybe there was like 4 or 5 years ago going to like Stanford poster sessions. There's a lot of people building in the emotional tracking space. So I like this is like a term I made up, but it just like basically study your facial impression, or like facial like emotion that kind of like make sure that like I guess like just test if you're happy or sad, but like I feel like it can only do like some sort of like general detection. But I was just like so curious about like how do people really use it in different use case. And obviously this company has been very successfully, raised like to Series B and like, and I was just like really curious. So since like I guess like we chat about like I guess like Haven and I guess like NLX, like I think they both seems like people with a lot of like domain expertise and experiences to like be in the domain that they're like succeeding in. I guess like maybe we will do like one last question and then 1 minute fire run. So one last question would be like, I guess like how do you think about the exit strategy of some of the startups? What if a founder come in? Obviously, no one will just bluntly say, we want to be acquired or like we want to partner with Comcast in the long run.
Yeah.
So how do you evaluate when a company that comes in and, though like, people will say they want this company to IPO or something, but like, I guess like, what if they want to just like being bought by a Comcast or like being exit in like an M&A or something like that? So how do you think about exit when a company pitch you?
It's a good question. So it's like it's a hard one. So I feel like a lot of times when you make an investment, you kind of have an idea about these are like the potential kind of outcomes, like the XY, like this company maybe like could be a good fit for big tech company XYZ. Who knows? But we never kind of specifically kind of underwrite an investment with kind of a sale to a big enterprise as kind of the end goal. It's much more just focused on like the belief that if the startup we're investing in can build kind of a really durable, high growth business, that the acquirers or exit options will be there, regardless of kind of what specifically those are. So that's kind of one aspect. The second aspect about kind of the acquired by Comcast is definitely something we don't think a lot about. So like we specifically, our group, we don't kind of invest with that goal of Comcast acquiring a portfolio company. Like if that were to happen, like that's great, but it's certainly not something that we kind of focus on. There may be other kind of corporate venture groups that's kind of a more common outcome, is that the companies they invest in are acquired by kind of the parent company. That's a little bit kind of less kind of true, I think, of a company like Comcast, and certainly not one of our goals. Like once we invest, kind of our goal is to be kind of good partners if we're a board member or a board observer, making sure we're kind of giving the valuable feedback kind of in that capacity, but also kind of helping to facilitate growth from a Comcast perspective. But oftentimes those are like top line focused growth initiatives for the company, not specifically kind of M&A within Comcast.
For sure. I want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah.
We'll wrap with a quick fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
Oh, favorite book. Geez. So I'm gonna do non-business because that's probably more fun. But something I read pretty recently is a book called The Last Days of Night, which is just focused on kind of the kind of battle between Westinghouse and Edison for kind of commercializing electricity. So I don't know if it's favorite, but it's a good one that I recently read. Sorry, I'm doing a very bad job of keeping this speedy, so I will do better.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
That's a pretty easy one. So Allison Goldberg, so our managing partner at Comcast, who, again, as I mentioned, crazily enough, hired me twice.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? I mean, as a lifelong New York Mets fan, I'd probably have to say David Wright, so former Mets captain.
Where can we find you outside work?
Oftentimes running on the West Side Highway. So big, pretty slow, but avid distance runner. So I ran the New York City Marathon a few times. So
oh my god!
But you'll often find me out on the West Side. So
wow, I love that.
I'll see you there.
Sounds great. Well, Marc, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun, informative conversation. Learned so much about energy and customer service in AI.
There you go. I don't know if those were my exact goals, but I'm glad it happened. So yeah, thank you, Grace. I really appreciate it.
Let me quickly end stream. It's